thank you for joining. I'm going to be moving on from what you saw last week. So last week we did the time controls. Today we're going to have a look at the temperature controls. If we think in terms of the whole system, starts off with your timer, time control, either your programmer or your single channel timer. That then is essentially a switch which outputs then to your temperature control, which is a temperature, a switch activated by temperature. So we're sort of in the middle between time switch and either boiler or motorised valve. So that's what we're looking at today. That naturally branches into two sets of temperature controls. We've got central heating and we've also got the hot water. So let me bring you in a little bit closer, and again I apologise for the noise of this camera system. I do need to sort of work on that, but let me just bring you in so you can see what I've got in front of me here. So we'll kick off with the simplest of our central heating stats, the RTS range. So you've probably all seen something like this before. This is our RTS1. So this is in all of our heating control packs, and it's quite a common dial control. Now, if you were using this with something like an LP from last week, you would need to be, in terms of your Boiler Plus compliance for combi boilers, you'd need to be looking elsewhere to be compliant. So you wouldn't be able to be compliant with the controls using our simplest of controls. Obviously for a system, you'd be absolutely fine, and you can use whatever you want, but it's just something to be mindful of. But this is by far and away our simplest controls. Now the RTS1 is a mains powered thermostat, so it requires a neutral, it requires a permanent live, and it also requires a switch live out, which is going to go off and power whatever it is, or switch whatever it is that you want to control. So this is an electronic device, so when you turn the dial up and down, you don't hear any clicking, so it's not bimetallic, it is electronic thermostat, and as such that gives you the superior accuracy. It's on, again, the industry standard backplate, but you'll notice on the backplate you've only got the terminals that are going to be used. So if you mix this up with an LP backplate, just make sure that you do get the right backplate for the stat. It will fit, but obviously if you would use this on an LP, you are missing some terminals. So just make sure that the backplate that comes with it is the one that you use, because you are down those terminals. But it's a mains powered room thermostat. Underneath the cap, you've got these arms which allow you to range limit. So these coincide with, on the back of the dial, you've got a little nodule there. So if you want to range limit these, you can move the arms around, and then depending on where you put the dial when you put it back on, and with respect to where those arms are, you can range limit. So you can see now that I'm sort of limiting it on the upper side, so you can do a high limit, a low limit, or you can do a range in between. So that's quite nice, and obviously with the dial on, nobody knows it's there, so it's quite good if you want to do range limiting. So that's an RTS1. I'll move on to the RTS2, which essentially is exactly the same as the RTS1, except in the top corner here, you've got a little light that shows you if you're calling for heat. So if there's a call for heat, that will light up. Again, it's mains powered, so it's got to have a permanent live, or it's got to have a live and a neutral. It won't be a permanent live because it will be the live that's downstream programmer. So you've got to have a live in, you've got to have a neutral, and then you have your switch live out. So that's essentially an RTS1 with an indicator is an RTS2. The next in the range is the RTS3. Now this one is a little bit different, and you can see from the dial that we've got the range is between 3 and 10 degrees. This is our frost stat. So this is the air frost stat. You would normally use it in conjunction with one of these, which is a PTS1. That's a pipe stat. So if you're going to do two-stage frost protection, you'd use these together. I'm not going to cover this in great detail because there's going to be a future video where I show you how to do two-stage frost protection, but it's just something to be aware of. That would be the air part, and that's the pipe part. Together it gives you two-stage frost protection. In terms of its wiring, again, it's an electronic thermostat, so it does require a neutral. So it's, again, a 3-wire thermostat, live in, neutral in, and a live out. That's the RTS3. We're now on to the RTS4, and again, that was exactly the same backplate as well as the RTS and 2. RTS4, same backplate, although you've got a full populated rail of terminals here, because the RTS4 is volt free. So this wiring on this is exactly the same really as a single channel timer where you've got a permanent supply in, so your 230 volts comes in on a permanent supply onto the first two terminals, and then you've got control then of what switches. So if you want to switch 12 volts or 24 volts, or if you want to get to the normally closed contact, you can do that with an RTS4. So this would be designated as a 4-wire thermostat. Everything we've seen up to now is a 3-wire, but does require a neutral, requires a permanent live, and then you've got your switching contacts throughout. But in terms of range limiting, exactly the same under the cover, exactly the same swing on temperature, 10 to 30 degrees. So RTS4 is volt free. We then come on to one which is a bit of an oddball, which is the RTS8. It's also known as a Digistat, and this is the only one in the RTS range that doesn't share that industry standard backplate. That's got a completely different backplate. That's actually like a Patras. That's to stand it off of the wall. And then to get into this, you don't undo the screws at the bottom. You take off the cap, you undo the screw, and then the face comes off completely. So you can see the backplate on that is essentially a PCB. Now this is a bimetal thermostat, so this, you do hear it click as you go past set point. And the reason it's called combi is for combi boilers, and that's something that a lot of people get hung up on, is because it's not for combi boiler, it's called combi because there are multiple ways that you can wire it. So this is a really good thermostat to keep on the van, because whatever you come up against, you're going to be able to use it. And the reason I say that is it works as a 3-wire thermostat. So if you've got a neutral, a live in, and a switch live out, that's, you can wire it as a 3-wire thermostat. But if you've got just a live in and a live out, so a 2-wire thermostat, you can use this in its place. So you don't need a neutral necessarily to run this. You can if you've got it. If you haven't, it doesn't make any odds. What I will say is if you're using it as a 2-wire thermostat, you just need to be a bit mindful of the current that you're drawing, because what current you draw, it can handle anything up to 6 amps, but depending on where your current range falls, depends on where you wire it. So you would either use terminals 2 or 3, depending on the current that you're drawing. So obviously if you turn it off the wall, set your multimeter up, your multimeter so that your current flows through it from the live in to the live out. That's what current you're drawing, and then you'll be able to wire it accordingly. So it's a Digistat, it's an RTS8, 3 different ways of wiring it. Really good to get you out of trouble, because whatever you find behind an existing thermostat, you're going to be able to make work with the Digistat. And then the 2 to finish on is the RTS 9 and 10, which these are quite rare. You don't see these around very often. But the RTS 9, that is essentially, you can view it as an RTS 4, which is volt free, but with an indicator in the top corner. So you can either view it as an RTS 2 that's volt free, or you can view it as an RTS 4 with an indicator. But other than that, exactly the same current controlling capability, which is 2 amps. Resistive, 1 amp inductive, but you don't see it very often, but it's one to be aware of. And if you do need volt free and you need an indicator, you can use the RTS 9. And the last one, which really is even rarer, is the RTS 10. And this, again, the wiring is like an RTS 4, so it is volt free, so it's a 4-wire thermostat. But the difference with this is it's got a minimum setting of 16 degrees. So if you're fitting it in a care home or somewhere where you've got to make sure that the temperature doesn't drop below 16, you fit the RTS 10, and you know even if you set it down to minimum, you won't go below that 16 degree limit. But in terms of the wiring, it's volt free, very much like the RTS 4 and the RTS 9. So that really takes care of the RTS range. We'll now move on and have a look at the Digistat range. So moving on from this idea of boiler plus compliance for your combi, if you use one of the LPs for your timing that we looked at last week, if you pair it up with one of the Digistats, then you will be boiler plus compliant. So I'll kick off with the wired versions and the non-programmable versions. So you've probably all seen one of these. This is the Digistat Plus. It's got the dial on the front of it, and this is a straightforward up and down thermostat. So it's ideal to replace something from the RTS range, but it does have intelligence in it, in so much that you can go in and you can control how it modulates. So you can select between the system type between oil and gas, and that will tweak how it modulates the system. So that's what makes it Boiler Plus compliant. But in terms of a control which is the next stage up from the RTS range, but still very simple, you'd be looking at the Digistat Plus. So straightforward up and down control, no programming, not looking at any timings, purely a temperature control. We've then got the Digistat Plus 1, which I did have one of them here. But again, Digistat Plus 1 looks very much like the rest of the Digistat, but except you've just got the plus and minus button here, so it's exactly the same in its functionality as the Digistat Plus. It's just if you don't want the dial control and you want something with a bit of a bigger screen, you've still got up and down functionality with your temperature. You've also got a couple of preset buttons, so the on and the off, those are presets that rather than hammering away on the up and down button, you'd set your on to something like 20 degrees, you might set your off to something like 10, and then you can just toggle between. So that's the Digistat Plus 1. Not as common in the field as the Plus, but if your customer wants a bigger screen and they want button control rather than the rotary dial, then Digistat Plus 1 is something to consider. I would also say with both of these, they run on batteries. So in the bottom of the Plus, you've got the battery compartment, and on the Plus 1, there is the battery compartment. So these are 2-wire thermostats. So again, great for having on the van, because whatever you come up against, you're going to have a live in, you're going to have a live out, so you're going to be with a Digistat Plus or Plus 1. So those are the non-programmable versions. They also come in an RF version, which I'll show you in a minute, but before I do that, we'll have a look at the programmable side. So that brings us on to the Plus 2 and Digistat Plus 3. So Plus 2 is 24-hour programming, so you can have 3 periods throughout the day, or 3 ons and 3 offs, you can view it as, much like the LP, but every day would be the same. So you'd set it up once and then every day would follow the same. You can use it in manual mode as well, which is just a straightforward up and down thermostat, but if it's set to auto, it's following the schedule that you're setting, which is different time and temperature events throughout the day. Easy to program. Just keep stepping through with the left-hand arrow key, and that will take you through all of your periods. Options on here as well that allow you to delete periods if you want. So if you don't want the full 6, you can just set the times together like we do with the LP, or you can actually go in and you can actually program them out. There's many different user options in there. And also there's installer options again where you can set the different cycle rates. If you want to lock the buttons out, you can do that, so you can make it so that it's got access protection. So a really good bit of kit. Plus 2 is 24-hour, Plus 3 is 7 days. So if you want to do every day differently, you'd go for the Plus 3. What I will say with this is, and you need to be careful when you're looking at the Plus 2 and the Plus 3, because there are 2 different versions. Now, we're not talking RF at this stage. This is still, both of these are wired. This one is a mains version. This one is a battery version. Let me pop the cover off so you can see. These are both Digistat Plus 2s. One's got no battery cover, the other one has. This is the Digistat Plus 2 4-wire thermostat, so you require a permanent live and neutral. A bit like what you do for the RTS4, so you need a permanent live in, and then you've got access to the switching contacts, which are volt free. So the mains is a 4-wire thermostat. The battery version, again, is a 2-wire thermostat. The battery is there to run the actual control, so all you need is a live in and a live out. And again, that is volt free. All of the Digistat range is volt free. It's just the mains one. Generally speaking, you'd use the battery if you were retrofitting, so you don't know what you're going to come up against, but you've got to have a live in and a live out, so you would use the battery. If you were running in for sort of first fixing for a new build, you're going to use the mains version, because you're going to run the cables in, you're not going to have to change batteries, so you're going to make provision for those extra 2 wires, the live and the neutral, to run the control. So something to be mindful of. If you're looking at the Plus 2 and the Plus 3, there is a mains version as well as the battery. Make sure you get the right one. Lastly, I'll move on to the RF versions of these. So exactly what we saw before, Digistat Plus, you get a Digistat Plus RF, and it's a wireless control that comes with an SCR, so that's your single channel receiver, is what SCR stands for. So this again is volt free, so it's a 4-wire control. You need permanent live and neutral to run it, and then you've got access to your switch contacts, and you're normally open and you're normally closed through that. All of these RF packs share the same SCR, so it doesn't matter if you've got an SCR already in. You could upgrade a customer from a non-programmable version to a programmable. But we've got the plus RF, we've got the plus 1 RF, plus 2 RF, and plus 3 RF, and we also do an RF cylinder stat, which I'll show you in a minute. But again, in terms of programming, there's no difference between the RFs and the wired versions. It's still 3 ons and 3 offs throughout the day, different time and temperature events throughout the day, things like holiday mode where you set the countdown timer. It's just that you've got the luxury of being able to walk around the property with it. So if it's not convenient to get wires to it, or the customer wants to move it around, you can do it with, you would need to fit an SCR, and then your actual stat is remote. But again, if you're looking at replacing an RF control, so say if you have a Digistat transmitter, this part that goes faulty, if it's a plus 2, like this one is, you need to make sure it's a plus 2 RF that you replace it with. Don't buy the Digistat plus 2 and think, oh, well, it's got a battery compartment, it must be RF. It isn't. If you need a plus 2 RF, it's got to be the plus 2 RF. If it's just a plus 2, you'll never get that to pair to an SCR because it's not a wireless control. So that's really a fairly broad overview of the range. I will show you this, which is a Digistat plus 2 SI. This is a new one that we've added to the range. So we've added an S. If you remember last week, we did the demo with the LP SI. I'll bring you in and let you have a look at this one. So this is a Digistat that you can see is in service mode. So this is how the service schedule set up for it. And this is what it does when it runs out of time. You get the service due come up, and you can hear the audible alarm is set there. So if you need to be setting service intervals for local authority, you can do it with the Digistat SI range. We do a plus 3 as well in that range. But in terms of programming, it's exactly the same. The customer wouldn't know any different. All you get is the capability of going in and setting it up. You don't need the reset key for this. It's done on a passcode that you put in. If you come to a job where you don't know what the passcode is, you can talk to our customer services team, and they will take you through the process for unlocking it. They'll ask you some different questions than that. So we can do it if you don't know what the passcode is, but obviously we need to make sure that you are an installer and not just a tenant that's phoning up trying to reset the SI. So let me now take you over. We'll do a demo. So let me take you over. I again apologise for the noise that this thing makes, particularly if you're on headphones. I imagine it's not great, but what we've got set up here is you can see there's an SCR on the board. So I'll just take you through a quick commissioning of how we do an SCR. So as soon as you turn the power on, you should get the constant red alarm light. So straight out the box, you clip the control onto the back plate, you get the solid receive alarm. Now, when it's in receive alarm like this, you've got the capability of pressing the override and firing the on. Now, this override doesn't work when you've got a control paired to it, because you can't override a working system. The override is designed so that if for some reason this has fallen off of the network, the customer can go in and they can actually get control of their system. So by hitting the override, that will actually fire the relay and switch whatever it is downstream that you're switching. But let's assume you're going through and you want to commission this. So first thing is, if it's been on for a while, power cycle it, bring it back on and wait for the alarm light to come on, which it is there. Then hit the override, make sure that you get the green light on, and also make sure that has fired whatever it is downstream, maybe the boiler, or open the valve, or whatever it is that it's doing. Make sure that by hitting that override, it's done that. Now to get it into learn mode, you press and hold down button 1, followed by button 2, and you see that the alarm light flickers. As soon as it goes off, you let go, and the alarm light comes back on. We now insert the batteries into the control. Control powers up, and you should see the red alarm light starts flashing, and we're not calling for heat at the moment. You can see it's 21 degrees is what it's set to. If we press the plus button, we're not calling for heat. If we increase that and call for heat, you get the flame symbol in the corner there, and you get the on light. And you can see you can't override a working system. So that's how you would quickly go through and commission. Every time that this sends a signal, you'll get the receive alarm flashing. If you find that you turn up and you see the receive alarm light is pulsing, sort of on a regular sort of pulse, it's a good indicator that the batteries need changing in this, and as such you will have a little battery indicator that comes up to show you what's going on with that if you need to change that. So that's the first demo. The second one that I'm going to do for you, we're going to have a look. Let me move you around to have a look at our friend the Green Star boiler. So now I'm just going to take you through a commissioning on how you do these. So let me just get some light on that screen so you can see what's going on. This is really when a full production crew would be really useful for stuff like this. So let's power that on. And if I zoom you in, hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on there. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see what's on the screen. I can see what's on there now. So the way we commission this, so this is an LP10RF. So we looked last week at the clip-ins. This is the RF version of the clip-ins. So this is an LP10RF. It comes with, you can get it with a Digistat +2 or +3 RF. So the way you commission these is, first thing is you start with the batteries out of your control. So you want to start with the control powered down. You press and hold the set button and you keep it held in. And you see it comes up with LRN off. See if I can zoom in a little bit more on that so you can see what's going on. So there you see LRN off. You get to that from pressing and holding the set button. You then press the plus button and that changes the off to on, and you get the little antenna symbol flashing. When you do that, insert your batteries into your control and you can see it comes up with SSI. So that's telling you that it's now joined to the LP. Now you can, if you want, leave it at that. So if you press the OK button, it changes to off, and you press set. That takes you back out. So the control is now paired up. If we make any changes on the control, you'll see that little green indicator there will blink red. There you go. So that's receiving the command. But what you really should do with this when you're setting it up is you should use the signal strength test, which again you can get into by pressing and holding set. As soon as it comes to learn, you press set again and you're back to the SSI. That was me with a bit of finger trouble there, so press and hold it in. There's learn, SSI. If you set that to on, you can then use the signal you on the control itself with the batteries out. You press and hold. Let me try and get this into shot. Press and hold plus. Insert the batteries. Keep the plus button pressed down. That puts you into RF mode, and you can see now on the screen you've got 4 chevrons at the side. Those are a signal strength indicator. So if you now go off and put the control where you want it to be, you should see those chevrons change. So it's a good little indicator, rather than just adding the stat and just hoping for the best. If you use the SSI mode, the signal strength indicator test mode, you've got the little chevrons at the side that show you what you need to do. So that is that for the demos. Let me bring you back out. And the last thing I'm going to show you now is the cylinder stat. So we're going to have a look at the wireless cylinder stat. Let me bring you up there. So we've had a lot of requests about the wireless cylinder stat and how it works. So I've got one here that I'm going to show you. So in the wireless cylinder stat box you get an SCR, but it's a different SCR. It's one that's got a 1 hour boost, so if you use the override it's timed for 1 hour for safety. So you get a +C SCR, which is your wireless receiver. You get the cylinder stat itself, and you also get the sensor. So the thing to remember with these is this is not wireless in so much as you can walk around the house with it. This wires to this, so the sensing is fed by a wire into the terminal block in the back of this, and then this sends a signal to the +C SCR, which can be elsewhere. So if you've got a cylinder in your loft, say, this is doing the sensing in the loft, your motorised valves may be elsewhere, so rather than running a cable you would put an SCR there, and that's where you get the wireless link. So it's not a wireless cylinder stat in so much as you can walk around the property changing the control, changing the temperature on this. That sits with the cylinder, that goes elsewhere depending on what it is that you're trying to control.